Today on the Ask BP podcast, we're talking about how do you find a good deal in a new town, part 2. If you didn't watch yesterday's episode, you should probably watch that before you watch this one. But let's get going.
You're listening to another BiggerPockets Ask BP podcast, where you'll hear short, direct answers to your biggest real estate questions. Submit your question today on Facebook, Twitter, or the BiggerPockets forums by using hashtag AskBP. And don't forget to pick up your copy of the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Real Estate Investing and other great content when you sign up for your free account at BiggerPockets.com. With that, let's get to the show.
Hey everyone, thank you again for joining us. Today we're talking about part 2 of a 2-part series on how do you find a good real estate deal, especially if you're new in town. Yesterday we talked with Jaren Barnes, who just recently moved from San Francisco all the way over to Indianapolis to invest in real estate in a market that's a little more friendly to real estate. So he's new, he's excited, he's a hustler, he's going to get into this game, and he just picked my brain for a while and to ask how I would get started and what he should do to get started. And I gave him a bunch of tips, but today we're going to talk about even more of those tips. So today is part 2. So grab your pencil, paper, and let's get to the interview with Jaren Barnes.
2 questions.
Sure.
In terms of running my numbers, what are, let's say, the top 3 number crunching techniques, or whatever you call them,
Rules of thumb.
Yeah, what are the rules of thumb that I need to master? Like not even rules of thumb, but like ROI or cash on cash return. Like, what out of those measurements, what are the ones that I need to know? Like, or else I'll die.
Sure. Okay, so here's how I look at it. I mean, let me kind of walk you through my entire, if I were in your shoes, what I would do. So first of all, I've talked about this a lot recently on BP, this idea of a funnel, right? You have this massive funnel where it's wide on the top, small on the bottom. And you want to get as many deals as you can in that top, and then you filter them out until there's only a few left that you actually care about, and then you buy one. That's kind of how real estate works, right? So imagine for a second that you're just looking on the MLS, even though you're not going to necessarily be dealing with the MLS, but it's an easy scenario. So you're looking at the MLS, and you don't have access to, you're using like Realtor.com, Zillow.com, Trulia.com, whatever. Or your agent sent over a list of all the properties. So you're looking at this list of hundreds, like there's 20 on a page and there's 500 pages, and you can just click, click, click and see all these properties. First of all, you want to filter out the ones that you automatically don't want to buy in locations you don't want to buy. Right. So you're taking that 50,000 properties for sale in your area and limiting that down to 2,000 that are for sale in your area, because you limit it. You only this zip code, this zip code, this zip code, and this zip code. Okay. And then you're saying, okay, I only want multifamily. Boom. That drops off 90% of them. Now you're left with, let's see, like, I don't know, 500 that are left or 300 that are left. And you're saying, okay, now I'm going to look through these. And then what I will usually do is just scroll through and use the rules of thumb. This is how you use rules of thumb. There's a lot of debate on rules of thumb on BP, right? Some people say they're useless, but here's where they're useful. And every investor does them, and they just don't want to call it a rule of thumb, but they do. If you were to scroll through and you were to see a property listed at $1 million and it's just a duplex and each half would rent out for $50 a month, that's an obvious, that brings in $100 a month and it would cost me $1 million to buy it. That's a terrible deal, right? Now that's kind of an extreme example. You're never going to actually find that. But the idea of comparing the rent that comes in to how much the cost of the property is, that's a rule of thumb. So we call that either the 1% rule or the 2% rule. You might hear both. I don't actually like the word rule. I like the word test. Does it meet the 1% test? Does it meet the 2% test? So like, because all you're doing is running it by. So the 1% test says that the rent that comes in is 1% of the purchase price. So if you're looking at a property and it's listed at $100,000, and you're looking at it and you're like, well, I think that thing, just off a quick guess, it's going to rent for about $1,200 a month. So $100,000 rents for $1,200 a month. $1,200 is 1.2% of $100,000. Does that make sense? So the monthly rent is 1.2%. So it meets the 1% test. It doesn't meet the 2% test. Now, it doesn't mean it's a bad deal or good deal. It's just a way of saying,
this is worth looking into.
Yeah, this is worth looking into. Anything below 1% in my area, anything below 1%, I know it will not cash flow. I've never seen a property in my area cash flow at less than the 1% test, because I mean, now your area might be different, but I doubt it. That's a pretty normal thing. It's hard to cash flow under 1%. Now, granted, you could just put down a huge down payment, and then, of course, anything will cash flow because you have no mortgage. But, typically speaking, I look for things between 1 and 2. If I can get higher than 2, great. 2 is a standard a lot of people use, and I do too in a way. Like, I would love to find 2% deals. If I can find a property for $100,000 that will rent for $2,000 a month, now I know that there is a very good chance that property will cash flow. Not for sure, just a very good chance. So as you're scrolling through all these deals, or you're getting dozens of phone calls in, you're running everyone by this quick 1 or 2% test. Like, where does that fit in that range? Does it seem like it'd be a good deal or not? If it's obviously a bad deal, throw it away. Right. If it seems promising, that's when you want to do a deeper analysis. And then at that point, what I usually will do is I'll dive into the numbers, and then I'll use the 50% rule at that point. So first I started with a quick screen using the 1 and 2% rule. Then I'm going to dive in deeper using the 50% rule. And this is how the 50% rule goes. It says that over time on a property, about half of the money that comes in leaves in expenses. And that's not counting the mortgage payment. So let's do another quick example of that. A property rents for $1,200 a month, like we just said. Drop that $1,200 a month in half, and how much we're left with? $600. So we have $600 left to pay the mortgage. Also, that is known as net operating income, but that's a different conversation. But so you have $600 left to pay the mortgage. Well, how much is the mortgage on that property? There's a million online mortgage calculators. BiggerPockets has one at biggerpockets.com/calc. But there's a ton of them. You just plug in the loan amount, the interest rate that you think you're going to get, and the term, how many years are going to be for. So typically, I usually plug in about 5%, 30 years, and whatever the loan's going to be. All right, so let's just say we did that same thing to $1,200 a month, and my mortgage was, I'm going to actually do it while we're talking here. So I'm going to go over to biggerpockets.com/calc. Okay, so I just ran the numbers through the BiggerPockets mortgage calculator, and I put in $100,000 just for kicks. I put in $100,000 loan for 30 years at 5%. It works out to $536.82. Well, a minute ago we said that the property rented, the 50% rule left $600 to pay the mortgage. So if that was the case, we have $600 to pay a mortgage, and the mortgage costs $536. We're left with, what's that, $64 a month in cash flow? It's not very much, right? Now I just did $100,000 just for kicks. Now, what if that property was listed at $60,000? Let's try that. Let's say $60,000, and then we're gonna put, we could hypothetically guess on a down payment. Are we going to put one down? Are we going to not? Let's just say we have a $60,000 mortgage. So whatever that works out to in terms of down payment, we can figure that out later. And what I mean by that is, if we have a $60,000 mortgage, the property could be a $100,000 property that we put $40,000 down. It could be an $80,000 property we put $20,000 down. It could be a $60,000 we put $0 down. So I don't care about how much money I put down at this point. I'm not really worried about that. I'm worried about what the loan amount is. So at $60,000 loan amount for 30 years at a 5% interest rate, we're looking at $322 a month. Well, we had $600 to pay the mortgage. We have $322. Now we're left with, what's that, $278? Now we're making $278 a month in cash flow. That's extra money in our pocket. Now, again, this is just a rule of thumb. This is a 50% rule of thumb. And so this is just one more quick screening. And I do this, you can do all this in your head. I mean, you can kind of typically guess on the mortgage payment. 60,000 is about 322, 100,000 is about, I don't know, what was it, 530. It's about half, right? So I mean, like 60,000, divide that in half, is 30,000, knock off a couple zeros and you're at 300. It's a fairly close way to guess it.
Now, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Based off of, because you actually have property, would you say that it's better to be more conservative and actually say like 65% rule of thumb? Or, I mean, how accurate does 50% usually come out for in your experience?
Sure. So in my experience, my apartment complex is at about 48%, I think is what it was last year. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was 48, but I do my own management. Had I used management, I'd probably up to like 55, 60%. So, but that said, it doesn't matter at this point because we're not actually doing the analysis, right? We're only doing we're just filtering at this point still. Yeah. So I think it's okay to use 50% because now at this point, like now I'm looking at this property and it was listed. We'll just we'll just say it was listed at $70,000.
Okay.
So, and I just used the number of 60. So we know that if I put 10, it's listed at 70. If I bought it for 60, meaning I offered them 60 and got a 100% loan, and this is, we can talk about strategies for doing that. But if I did that, I paid 60, I had a $60,000 loan, I know it would cash flow, or at least as of now in the screening process, it's going to cash flow $278 a month. That's a pretty good amount of money for not having to put any money down. I typically look for anywhere between $100 and $200 a month per unit in cash flow when I'm doing it this kind of thinking, right? There are no hard and fast rules. I mean, what if your area you're buying in, you expect it to double in price over the next 5 years? Well, then you can accept a lot less cash flow. Now, that's playing the appreciation gamble, and I'm not suggesting people do that, but I'm just saying there are circumstances where cash flow is not the only determinant. But anyway, so let me go back. So the 50% rule, basically, as we're screening through all these properties, that we just eliminated most of them because they're under 1%, right? So I would take out anything under 1%. Now we're left with like 10 properties on our list. Out of the 10 properties, I quickly ran the 50% rule through through all of them. It takes about 30 seconds each, and in the end, I end up with 2 properties that look like they'll be pretty good. One of them was listed at $70,000 and will rent for $1,200 a month. One was listed at $80,000 and will rent for $1,100 a month. Well, for hypothetical cases, I'm like, okay, well, those 2 look interesting. Now I would take those 2 and go plug them the actual numbers in to like the rental property calculator on BiggerPockets. Or if you've got a really fancy spreadsheet, you could use that. But I'm a huge fan, obviously, of the rental property calculator, and so I would plug in the numbers on that one and come up with an exact, at least as close as possible to what the deal is going to actually look like. And maybe the 50% rule is completely wrong. But at this point, at least it gives you a good, now this is where you actually do your numbers and figure it out.
So my question at this point is, how do you verify the market rent price? Like,
sure.
Because obviously somebody, especially if I'm going after mom and pops, they might be, renting way below market. And then like, how do you gauge that?
Sure. A couple of ways you can figure that out. One, you could try to use a site like rentometer.com.
Is that accurate? I've used it before, but I just want to know how accurate it is.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust it, number one, but I mean, it is fairly accurate. They do a good job. I do like them. I would not rely on that, though. What I would rely on is I would maybe start there if you're looking to do a quick screen. But when it comes down to knowing the actual numbers, plugging them into the calculator, I would do one of a couple things. Go on Craigslist and look what everybody's renting the properties for. So you can say
in a vicinity of
correct.
the zip code?
Yep.
Okay.
And like within a 1 mile, similar properties within that area, I would look at that. That's a fairly okay gauge. Now, it's not perfect because those are listed; those aren't actually rented. But I would assume that whoever's listing them, if let's say we're talking about 2-bedroom apartments, just for example, 2-bedroom apartments in a multifamily unit, I would go look at all these 2 bedrooms, and one's listed at $675, one's at $650, one's at $645, one's at $700, one's at $622, one's at $750. You can generally get a range in there of, this one looks like it's a little bit higher. This is a $700 one, but it's clearly that is a nice property. Like that is a lot nicer than mine. Now this one listed at $620, and it looks like a pile of junk. So I'm going to guess I'm going to be in there. So that's one way to do it. And then another way to do it is you can talk to property management companies. Call them up and just say, hey.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Because when I was a leasing specialist for like a month, a part of my job was I had to actually call up other property management companies, asking them what they're renting their properties are based on certain criteria. So I was wondering, but the thing is it's very different when it's like a commercial 1,000-unit complex and what they're renting their 2-bedroom 1-baths for versus what a mom and pop's going to rent their 2-bedroom 1-bath for. Yeah,
so you're going to look for the similar property types, similar, similar style, similar, as close as you can get. Now, you're not going to get perfect, but you can get pretty close and get a fairly accurate number. And then be conservative. I mean, if you're like, I think we might be able to get 675, then it's probably not worth 675. If you say, I think we can get, that's an indication you're probably pushing it. So like on the property I'm doing right now, I'm like, I think I could get 995, but in reality, we just got it rented for 950. We just signed a deposit to hold for 950 because that felt more like it was easy. 950 was, I don't know, it was good. 995 was pushing it. And so this guy, I mean maybe I could have pushed it to 995, but 950, I went a little bit more conservative. And anyway, so I mean, yeah, I would just ask around property management companies, maybe ask other landlords. This is where it's helpful to be involved in local real estate clubs, or just connect with people on BP. I mean, there's 300,000 members on BP at this point. There is somebody in your town who's on BP who's a landlord. I mean, like there just is in your area. In fact, in your area, there's tons of them. There's a huge Indianapolis group on BP. So, connect with those people and be like, hey, this is what I'm looking at. What do you think for rent for this thing? And again, you can kind of do guesses until you really want to nail down specifics. And that's when you can go and approach those. Now, that was kind of talking about the MLS, but you do pretty much the same thing if you were getting phone calls. Every phone call that comes in, go through that same screening process. How does this feel for the 1%, 2% test? How does this feel for the 50% rule? Is it worth doing an in-depth analysis on? Is it worth driving out to look at it? Is it worth doing an inspection on? As you get more and more involved in a property, as the funnel narrows, you can get more, you do more and more work. And so you don't want to do too much work up front. You want to find out those ways to quickly toss out the 99.99% of properties that are not going to be good deals. So you can just focus on the 1% or 0.5% or whatever that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck.
And so then when I have about 5 to 10 properties that, they pass all the tests and they look good based on the investment calculator, at that point, I just start calling the agents and making offers.
Yeah, I mean, you could. It's probably a good idea if you're going to do stuff on like the MLS. You're probably going to know how you're going to fund it. I would probably figure that out first.
Yeah, so that I need to go get funding situated.
Yeah, because I mean, it would just be wasting your agent's time if you're making offers on the MLS without having the funding, without having the funding at least somewhat lined up. Now, again, there's a lot of ways to fund deals without banks. Like you said, you can use seller financing. You can use, there's partnerships. There's home equity line of credit. There's cash if you've got it. There's all sorts of stuff.
So let's say I don't want. So, obviously, I'm going to go talk to portfolio lenders. But let's say worst case, there's nobody that wants to lend to me, and so my default is to get creative. If I explain that to my agent, like I'm looking for owner finance opportunities, I'm looking for creative funding opportunities, I have something I can put down for a down payment, et cetera, would my agent be willing to work with me at that point? Or typically I just need to find conventional lending and get pre-approved?
Sure. So that's a little bit tough in that I guess it would depend on an agent, but yeah, typically if you're telling an agent you want only seller financed, they'll still probably look for you, but they're not going to look very hard because frankly, they're worried. An agent is worried they're not going to get paid if they find you a seller finance deal a lot of times, unless it happens to be listed on the MLS and the seller's willing to do it and you put down a large down payment. I actually don't like deals typically that offer seller financing on the MLS, because what that tells me, because remember we talked about earlier that the idea of seller financing requires a great deal of trust. So the only person who's going to go list a property, I feel like, on the MLS and say, I will accept seller financing is somebody who's getting charging an outrageous amount. Or, it's possible they're just really desperate and need help, but I doubt it. Usually it's because they're going to charge you way more money than it's worth, ask for a way huge down payment. And again, that's not always the case, but typically it's always a red flag when anybody offers seller financing up front. It makes me nervous, which is why an agent probably isn't going to be the best help in trying to find those seller finance deals. The best way to find that is what we talked about earlier, is building connections with local landlords. I think we're probably in one of the best times of real estate investing life over the next 10 years as real estate investors are getting old. The baby boomer generation, they're tired of managing their properties. They're tired of evictions. They're tired of, changing over units and changing carpet and dealing with crappy tenants. And so as they all get in their 50s and 60s and 70s, people that all got into it 30 years ago, they want to get out, but they don't want to lose that income they've been making for 20 years. That's their retirement. That's why I think seller financing is going to be extremely valuable over the next decade. And there'll be a lot of opportunities for younger investors to come in and create a win-win situation with these older landlords who want to get out but want to keep the income.
Okay. Well, cool. That gives me a game plan for now. And then, thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah, no, this was fun.
Yeah. Hopefully, if you ever need another Ask BP podcast, I can pick your brain again.
Oh yeah, we'll do this. We'll do this again. This was fun. Yeah. So action steps. Just to kind of sum up what we talked about. I would make sure. Let's see. maybe you can help me with this. All we talked about today is talk to some property management companies, start posting Craigslist ads, start calling Craigslist landlords. Pull the if you want to do the direct mail thing, pull the list of properties that are over 10 that have been owned for longer than 10 years.
10 years.
And start sending letters to them. Now, what the letters say, you can go on the forums and find a ton of good templates, and people have suggested what to say in a direct mail letter.
Contact every property management company in your town and visit them once a month.
Yep, there you go. Build those relationships right now, and make sure that they give you when any of their clients come to them and say they were interested in selling. That's when you want them to say, I know a guy that's interested in buying. And you want that because, again, they want to keep it in-house. They want to keep managing that properperty. And you're the guy to do it.
What if the property management company is shady and you don't want to keep the property with them?
Sure. You don't, first of all, you don't.
Obviously, then you wouldn't ask. You just want to talk to that property manager.
Well, I mean, I would still talk to them. I just wouldn't tell them specifically, hey, I'm going to keep it in-house. Just tell them, build the relationship anyway. And then when you get the property, you never made any agreement. You never even implied that you're going to keep it in-house. They're just hoping that you'll keep it in-house. But if they suck and they're shady, then you have no obligation to keep it. You have no obligation anyway. But if they're crappy and shady and weird, don't stick with them. Or you could try them for a few months. But if you don't like them, don't imply that you'll work with them. Just tell them that you want to buy a property and ask them for help, and let them make assumptions if they want to. So
yeah,
cool.
Awesome.
All right. Well,
thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, you know where to find me, and if people have any questions more on what we talked about today, for either me or Jaren, they can obviously go to the show notes page, which is going to be at, I think, biggerpockets.com/askbp054. And that should be about where it's at. So with that, let's get out of here. Jaren, it's been fun.
It's been fun. Later, man.
Later. Talk to you later. Bye. All right, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed that 2-part series with Jaren Barnes talking about how to get started finding good deals. And, we talked about a lot of things in there, everything from Craigslist to talking with property managers to direct mail. We talked about all those ideas. And, those are not just original ideas that I just came up with, right? So I'm just a learner like you guys. I learned them, almost every one of those strategies, on BiggerPockets itself by engaging in the forums and by building relationships and by listening to the BiggerPockets podcast. Just by engaging on BiggerPockets, I learned all those things. And you can do the exact same thing. Just get involved, build relationships, talk with people. You never know what you're going to learn. The moment you stop learning is the moment you start dying. So with that, why don't we get out of here? Today's success quote comes from me. And that, seriously, I'm going to do today's success quote. And today's success quote actually is 50% of a great deal is better than 100% of no deal. That's a quote that I came up with a couple years ago, and to talk about why I love the idea of partnering with people and by working with other people and associating with other people, because it's better to split a deal than it is to get nothing ever. A lot of people are selfish and greedy and they want everything all to themselves, but this is a team game. This is a team sport. So get out there, build some relationships, and connect with those people. And with that, let's get out of here. For the Ask BP podcast, I'm Brandon, and remember, in pursuit of your goals, your dreams, your ambitions, whatever you want to build in life, don't just learn, take action. We'll see you guys around. I'm going to do today's success quote. And today's success quote actually is,
You've just heard another episode of the BiggerPockets Ask BP podcast. Submit your question today on Facebook, Twitter, or the BiggerPockets forum by using #AskBP. And for more incredible real estate investing tools and education, including a free download of our book, The Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Real Estate Investing, head over to BiggerPockets.com and sign up for your free account today. We'll see you on the next show.